Ребятки, всем привет! Начинаем нашу вечернюю тусовочку. Да, сейчас я в чатик напишу, что начинаем тусовочку. Итак, сегодня мы будем продолжать углубляться в нюансы Next.js с курсом, с кодом Мосса, Intermediate Next.js. Итак, давайте по традиции сделаем обзорчик нашего родмэпа. Наш челлендж — это зафармить полностью фронтенд мастерс. Также у нас есть традиция ритуала разминочки. Сейчас это решаем простенькие задачки на CodeWars. В данный момент 8 Q. Так, ну да, у нас там тут тоже есть челлендж. Зарешать все CodeWars таски. Но также мы проходим React.js Learning Path. Давайте я вам открою его. На данный момент пройдено 83%. То есть Complete React, Intermediate React, React Performance, React and TypeScript, Introduction to Next.js. Вот, и после Introduction to Next.js, да, мы сделали запятую и решили углубиться в Intermediate.js, Next.js. Дальше у нас, после этого курсика, у нас будет специальное исключение. Мы посмотрим React.js Crash курс, React UX From Zero to Hero, Monster Lessons. Так, ну и в ближайшем будущем, после того, как мы запилим текущую идею, у нас на ближайшей перспективе это пройти bootcamp. Да, это такое первое касание для человека, который хочет войти в IT. Introduction to HTML, CSS, HTML Forms. Так, какие-то проектики простенькие. Вот. Там Career Guidance. Тоже интересно. Но это большой объем. Дальше Beginner Learning Path. Да, тоже еще есть. Да, они в чем-то будут пересекаться. Вот, я думаю, что Introduction to DevTools. Да, также у нас есть тут статейки, которые кажутся интересными. То есть это S-сайт у нас, да, S-сайт. Вот, ну и дальше вот у нас есть раздел для React.js, да, это если нам понравится, получим заинтересованность от ребят. Вот, сделаем экскурс в React.js, что есть на фронтенд мастерс. Ну и дальше пойдем по тематическим путям. TypeScript Learning Path, там JavaScript Learning Path и так далее. functional JavaScript. Я думаю, что вот React.js, оно идет после functional JavaScript. Естественно. Ну вот, такой обзорчик нашего родмэпа. Ребятки, вы можете поучаствовать в нашей тусовочке и изменить этот roadmap так, как вам больше нравится. У нас есть такая возможность на Boosty. Да, есть каналчик на Boosty, на котором я выкладываю, дублирую лайвстримы, которые выкладываются на Ютубе. Вот, есть тусовщик. Подписка. Вот. Так, ну и по традиции давайте решим простенькую задачку на CodeWars. Может, она окажется и не простенькой. Совсем не простенькой. Так. Progress. I have not trained on. Difficulty 8Q. Given an array, add all the number elements and return the binary equivalent of that sum. To make the code bulletproof, anything else than a number should be added as 0. Since it can be added. If your language can handle float, binaries assume the array won't contain float or doubles. Array to binary. Array to binary. Not none is a number to in JavaScript for decimal binary and any base. Звучит, конечно, крипово. Вообще не представляю, как это порешать. Ну, типа, false это 0, да, типа, ну, undefined это 0. Array to binary. Типа нам сумму нужно найти, да? Given an array, add all the number elements. Given an array, add... Давай посмотрим. Ну, типа нам, что ли, сосчитать сумму этих значений и перевести их в двоичный код, что ли? Ну да, похоже, что это сумма. Просто какая-то формулировка такая. Не очень понятная. Так. А как мы можем в двоичный код? Что-то такое было. Типа parse int, по-моему, да? number parse int. Но тут мы пишем вот это вот число. Да, какое-то digit и основание, по которому приводим. Ну и тут типа const digit r reduce current плюс current. И вот это типа return. Number parse int is not a function. Expected none to equal 1,1. Ну, типа сюда проверку, что ли, включить? Ну, по идее, для 8-го кьюта не должно быть. Таких сложностей давай. If current return плюс 0. Какая-то сложная задачка. А, тут смотри, еще есть строка, да. If current if number is none, так, давайте включим Node.js. Давайте посмотрим, как он реагирует. Node.js. Сделаем покрупнее. Number is none. False. Давай, 1. False. False. А. Так. None true. Значит, нам нужно к числу привести, да? Чтобы проверка работала. Expected none to equal 1,1. А parse int. Ну-ка, давай проверим. Parse int. Да, mdn. mdn. Number. Но число, вот, if number is not parsed, то return 0. Но мы вроде думаем-то правильно. Давай выведем в консоль лог, что digit. Консоль лог. Digit. Digit у нас получилось 3. Binary. Number parse int digit 2. Получилось none. А что он должен хавать? Он строку, что ли, должен хавать? Coerced to a string. Вот оно что. Digit binary none. Почему? Если мы давай, digit. Вот, превратили в строку. Нужно 3, а binary number pass int digit в двойном. Ну-ка давай, Node.js. Давай. Number parse int один 2 3. А почему? Давай еще раз прочитаю. Что делает parse int? Он, смотри, он парсит. Он же не конвертирует. Он просто парсит строку в integer. And returns integer of the specific radix or base. integer between 2 и 36 that represent the radix, the base of a mathematical numeral system of a string. If radix undefined or 0, it assumed to be a decimal. Возвращаем значение строка. Так. Так потому что мы стрингу должны передавать. Тоже надо. Так, в десятичной 3. Так, 2. 0,1. Ну так он парсит. А обратно. Нам, короче, обратно надо, да? Там какой-то... Там руками можно это было сделать. Но, наверное, задача это не так. Да, конечно. Я забыл, как в binary-то. Давай. JS, convert to binary. Так. Что-то все какие-то дикие. Во. Какая-то дичь. Я такого даже не видел. toString и 2. Охренеть, конечно. Вот так, что ли, нам надо сделать? Вот это у нас разминочка. Топовая. Будет час тупника и позора. expected 1.0.0.0.1 to equal 1.1.1. Давай еще раз задание прочитаем. Given an array, add all the number elements and return the binary equivalent of that sum. To make the code bulletproof, anything else than a number should be added as 0, since it can't be added. Ну вот мы это проверяем. Если это none, да, вот мы переводим current к числу, если это none, то мы прибавляем плюс 0. Давай здесь сделаем. Может, из-за этого? Нет. Digit 3, binary none. А, это потому что мы вот эту штуку. Давай, вот так. Digit 3, binary 1.1.1. 15, вот так. 0, 0, 1.1.1, так. А 17 так. Expected вот столько, to equal вот столько. Да, ну вот у нас получается тесты, да? Вот actual r2pin 1 плюс 2. Вот, получается 3. Вот actual 11. Дальше получается 1 плюс 1 плюс 2 плюс 3, 6 плюс 15. Да, вот 15. Получается 1.1.1. Дальше получается такое же число. Получается 0. Да, а вот 17. Потому что мы приводим. Да, вот это true. Оно же у нас. Ну, здесь приводим. Проверку делаю на true. Сейчас. Из number. А есть такое? Из integer. True. False. Она будет из integer. Давай. Number is integer. None false. Давай попробуем проверить на integer. Не is none, а is integer. binary 0, digit 0, expected. Ну, давай посмотрим. Мы должны negate сделать вот так. И что получилось? Ну и задачка. Ну и задачка на 8 Q. Чё, давай. Should work to fix a test. For arrays containing none, expected output is the string none. Так, давай. А тут не 0. А как мы проверим? Ну, можно вот так вот сделать. If сейчас array sum ну что там? Item number is none. Return none. Такая проверка еще. Вот здесь наверху. Вот этот такой guard. Attempt. Should work for negative numbers too. Expected. Это точно 8 Q? To equal А где здесь эти тесты-то? Не посмотреть. Так, этот кейс мы порешали с наном. Да, теперь остались отрицательные числа. Should work for negative numbers too. Ну, типа, вот это это отрицательное число, да? Expected. Вот это. Консоль логи мы удалили, да? Консоль лог. Digit. Digit. Binary. Вот эта штука. Давай, attempt. А типа минус 15. Вот так. А должно быть типа вот так. Типа с минусом. О. Конечно, нелегкая ноша. Тяжело быть тупым. Так, давайте смотрим. Ну, как по-тупому, если максимально тупо, вот я проверяю. If digit меньше нуля, то есть оно отрицательное. То что я делаю? Я делаю return минус конкачу вот с этой штукой. Охренеть. Я вообще не ожидал такого. Конечно, такое извращение. Такой изврат. Ну давай посмотрим, как умные люди это делали. Чё, серьезно? Чё, серьезно? ToString с передачей 2 оно обладает вот этой поебенью. Да. Вот это хуеверчение. If type of number. Типа вот проверяем на number. Если на number, то прибавляем y. Если нет, то 0. А потом используем toString и приводим к бинарному. То есть, короче, у number, вот, number, ну, допустим, 5, есть метод toString. И мы можем передать в него вот эту дичь. Два или 36. Ну давай, допустим, передадим 10. Двоичная, троичная, четверичная, пятеричная, шестеричная, семеричная, восьмеричная. Да, 20. Вот так. Ну ладно. Поздравляю меня с этим. Объявляю разминку законченной. Успешно. И возвращаемся к нашему любимому, к Скотту Моссу. Итак, да, хочу вам показать, что варп, вдруг я попользовался варпом, вдруг I'm sorry, I can't complete that request. You've reached the monthly token limit. Your token limit resets on August 22. Ну-ка, давай. Is monthly token limit is what is my token limit? Ну-ка посмотрим. Вот так вот. How many requests I can execute? Вот так. Ну ладно. Мы же хотели запустить. Давай. Кода, фронтенд, мастерс, Next.js, Intermediate Next.js. Так, стартую npm run dev. npm run. Как там? Вот, db studio. Visual Studio. И localhost 3000.
We're gonna like basically do some CRUD, right? We're gonna use a server action, very similar to kind of what we did with the form, but outside of a form. With a form action, we let the form kind of handle everything. We do need to cause some mutations on the server. In this case, we want to create an event, and we need that to come back full circle. We want to see the event pop up on the page after we create it without having to go through some type of client implementation, which is fine, but we're going to show you how to do it without that. So that's what we're going to do. But first, let's kind of talk about it. So
Открываем nodes. Non-form server actions. Into various parts of your application, such as event handlers and React hooks. This allows for dynamic server-side operations and response.
you can use server actions on click. So far, we've only used them on an action prop on a form, but you can pass them to an on click. And if you're using an on click, that means you're inside of a client component. So that means, yes, you can use server actions inside of client components. That's one of their best use cases. In fact, I think we had to do that with the form regardless. So, an example of that is like, having a button that has a click, and instead of calling some function that you created in that component that does like an awaited fetch, you can just import that server action file and call that, and it'll do the thing on the server. You can also await the result of that server action call and get the result from it too. So the result can be passed back to the client as long as it's serializable, because it has to pass through the network threshold. But that's not unique to server actions. That's just HTTP in general. So trying to like serialize something circular or dates, serializing dates are hard. So like that might fail. They're trying to, I think I saw a post request that, I can't remember who's trying to, React is trying to patch the date object so it better serializes, because people keep running into this issue of trying to send dates over the network and it just breaks. So, but a lot of people are downvoting it. So maybe never. You can also use server actions inside of use effects. So if you have a use effect where you would typically call your API function to do something, you can call your server action instead. It also works there as well. It pretty much works everywhere you would have called some asynchronous function in your client. It's going to work there for the most part. Now, we had some stuff with the form where we could get an example of when we can use form status hook, but as long as the component that had that hook was a child of a form that used a form state, we would get a property that told us whether or not it was pending. So we can get the status of that. So how do we get the status of something, of a server action that's not part of a form? Well, that's where use transition comes from. So use transition, the best way I can describe use transition is...
Внимательно слушаем.
It's kind of like use state, except use state, when you call it, it will re-render. Use state is basically saying, hey, re-render this component. That's what use state is saying, right? When you call, like for instance, if I call set tab here, that's going to re-render this whole component. That's the whole point. But with use transition, when you call start transition, it basically is saying, hey, I don't want this, which normally does cause some blocking on the UI. I don't want that to actually affect the UI. Still update the state, still do the thing, just don't mess with the UI, right? I still want to be able to, user to be able to click around and do stuff. I don't want the UI to be interrupted by this. So in some examples, you would want that. In this example, I talk about tabs. I actually ripped this straight from the documentation. I thought it was pretty good. So in a tab interface, switching tabs might fetch new data for each tab. Using the use transition ensures that the UI remains responsive, even if the data fetch is slow. So if you hit another tab and it takes forever to get the data back, your user won't be able to click on anything. They have to wait for it to come back. But with the use transition, they can still click around. They can go back to another tab. They can keep going, and it's still loading in the background. It's not going to affect anything. So it's quite useful. So it's pretty cool. So we will be using that to make some non-blocking updates on our event. So let's do that. First thing we need to do is we need to make a new actions file. We're going to call it events, and that's where we're going to create a function called create new event.
Давай. Actions. Events.
So let's do that. In our actions folder at the top, we're going to say events, like that. Just going to bring in my imports. There's really nothing here that you haven't seen yet. I think the only one that's a little different is this random name thing. I didn't feel like making a modal. I was going to do the whole modal route intercepting thing, but I'm just like, honestly, I just don't use this in production. I can't fake it. Like, it's a cool feature, but I just never use it. So I didn't make a modal where you can type in an event name and do all that. Instead, we're just going to default to some stuff. So all you do is click the button and the event gets created for you with good defaults. But I could talk about the route intercepting, parallel routes combination to make a URL bound modal, which is great in theory, but I just don't use it in production. So I just didn't want to teach it. But yeah, this thing creates a random name. So yeah, let's make this function, export const, create new events. It's going to be async. I'm just going to await this. I'm just going to delay it because it really moves so quick. I'll say at most, make this 2 seconds. If you pass a number to delay, that's the upper bound of how long it should wait. We want to get the user. We need the user because we need to know who created the event. So we'll say user equals wait, get current user, like that. Oh, and don't forget, we need to put our use server at the top here. So we got that. And then we just want to go ahead and insert the a new event into the database. So I'm actually just going to copy this part right here, and I'll say this. There we go. db.insert, got our events, added a new one, set private defaults, gave it a random name, gave it a start date of now, and we said it's this user ID. So you notice we're not returning anything right now. We'll talk about that. You might be thinking like, oh, wait, don't you want to get this new event that you created and return it so you can get access to it? Maybe. I'll talk about what we're going to do instead, how you would do this, and why you probably can't do it right now. And even why you don't really need to. It's kind of crazy. Okay, so we got that. The next thing is we have a nav component. That nav component is where we're going to add a button that when you click it, will create a new event for you. It's pretty simple. So let's go do that. Let's go to our nav.
Let's do that. На handle click мы оборачиваем start transition и create new event. Делаем асинхронный запрос. И вешаем is pending. А где эта дичь? Еще нет пока, да?
Component up here. I'm going to import our create new event function like so. I'm going to import our use transition hook from React. It's from React. It's not Next.js. It's React, like so. And then we need to make our transition. So we're going here. I'm going to say this use transition like this. And then you get back a tuple. You get back a pending state. This is true if the transition has started, and then start transition is how you start it. So is pending, start transition, like that. There we go. The next thing is I'm just going to make a simple function for the on-click handler that just calls start transition and then creates the new event. Okay, so I'll say handle click. It's just going to start the transition, which takes a callback, and then I'm just going to say go ahead and create a new event. Notice I'm not awaiting it. This is not an async function. At least not right.
Так, а зачем нам его await, если мы просто запускаем side effect? Ну ладно.
Now it's not. It will be. We'll talk about that later, but now it's not. And then lastly, we just need to add in this little tooltip thing, and should be good to go. So I'm gonna add in this tooltip component, tooltip button component, just to make sure that the on-click is mapped to this on-click function we just made, and is loading is bound to pending, so it'll show a loader when it's actually trying to create.
Так, а button мы откуда берем? Next.js, Next.UI. Давай посмотрим, что это за библиотека компонентов. Next.UI. Оно в Next.js из коробки идет? Или мы отдельно либо устанавливали? А, оно еще и типа фреймворк агностик, да? Есть под React, есть еще под что-то. effortless. Ну, типа, effort это типа усилие, да? А less, типа, это отсутствие. Fully featured React UI library. А, это только для React, да, получается? Угу. Ну, а есть там? Get started. Components-то есть? Вот components. Аккордеон. Слушай, кажется, что это интереснее даже, чем Material UI. Сколько там у нее? Видите? А, отдельный пакет. $112 000. А материал? Да. Календар. Date input. List box. Tooltip. User. Next UI CLI. For React that helps you build beautiful user interface. No. Is specially designed for React as it is built on top of React area. Framer motion. Why does Next.UI use Framer motion? Потому что такое Framer motion. Да. Что-то знакомо. Ну ладно.
And I think that's it for that part right there. So now what we want to do is test this out, and let's see where it kind of falls apart. So now, oh, I gotta start this again. Keep forgetting I stopped it. You see, I keep typing bun. I use bun a lot. It's just faster. It's like way faster. It's crazy. Okay, so now you have this button up here that says new event.
Че, серьезно? Вот она. А, покрупнее сделаю. Так. Events-то создалось. Ну-ка еще разок. О, теперь 5. Теперь нужно, чтобы оно, вот эта штука стригерилась, да, у нас?
Okay, let's add some logs so we can actually see what's going on. Otherwise, it'll be really hard to.
Да, а у нас что? Давай. Раз. Раз. Вот это, да?
No. So I'm gonna just say also log event saved. Oops. Saved. Saving event. I guess you could do a trace here, but yeah, who's got time for that? So do that. Click this button. It loaded. Something happened. We can go look. It says saving event, event saved. So it did. It went ahead and did all of that. Before I go and do anything, did anybody expect anything else to happen? If you just look at this dashboard, did anybody expect one of these things to have some new thing on it maybe? Yeah. Right?
No.
Latest events. Maybe there should be another one here, right? If I do okay, here's a question. If I do a refresh, not a hard refresh, if I do a regular refresh, assuming the event got saved and assuming the query picks it up, will that show on the latest events?
I don't believe so due to the caching.
No.
Let's see. I'm not doing a hard refresh.
Yep.
It's cached.
The cache.
Right. If I do a hard refresh, it's there. Right? Caching. It's crazy. But we don't want either one of those behaviors. We want it to show up after we click the button. That's what we want, right? Okay. Let's fix that. So to fix that, we need cache.
Ссылочку
Right? If I
посмотрели.
do a hard refresh, it's there.
The latest events component only shows 5 events. Че, серьезно? Давай. Да, почему? Давай посмотрим. Components. App, dashboard, events. А, вот лимит. Вот этот лимит стоит.
Right? Caching. It's crazy. But we don't want
Мы не кэшировали.
either one of those behaviors. We want it to show up after we click the button. That's what we want, right? Okay. Let's fix that. So to fix that, we need to revalidate some tags, right? So first, what tag is this? Let's go figure out what tag this is. So if we go to that slot is for events. That page uses the get events for dashboard function. That uses the dashboard events tag. So we're going to revalidate this tag.
Очень интересно. А мы здесь не указывали. Get events for dashboard. Мы не оборачивали это в специальную функцию для кэширования.
So I'm going to go back to our events function. I'm going to go down here. I'm going to import something called revalidate tag from next cache. And then I'm going to say revalidate that dashboard events.
Или это какая-то аннотация в Next.js, что типа вот это road, а это slot.
Okay.
Давай. Dashboard. Events. Так, а как нам дропнуть?
This might work, or it won't. Let me just do a hard refresh just in case. And now I'm going to...
Мы руками можем дропнуть? Вот отсюда. Вот events. Вот раз, два, три, четыре, пять. Оставим два. Вот delete. Удалили. Нету.
First thing we need to do is we need to make a new actions file. We're going to call it event. Right? Like
Не то обновили. Вот заново запросили. Что там случилось? Перезапустим. Так, это не студио. PM Run Dev. А что, все сломалось, да? Я что-то не то удалил. О, смотрите, появляется. Значит, это аннотация. свойственно для... Вот это слот, вот это route, а вот это слот внутри роута. Вот он.
Revalidate some tags, right? So
Подожди, давай, знаешь, что сделаем? Короче, остановим сервак. npm run db seed. Вот. Давай еще раз попробуем. Failed to see database. Unique constraints failed. Events created by ID, events name. Давай дропнем эвансы. А мы же ее остановили. Delete. RSVPs тоже delete. Attendees тоже delete. Все, у нас только users. Один юзер должен быть. Сейчас мы заново создадим. Вот, создали. Run dev. Так, вот. И теперь new event. И теперь он здесь должен появиться. Вот. Появился.
first, what tag is this? Let's go figure out what tag this is. So if we go to that slot is for events. That page uses the get events for dashboard function.
Странно, что он вот сюда полез смотреть. Если это стандартная аннотация для слота. Странно, что он сюда полез смотреть, а не в доке нам показал. Давай посмотрим в доке. Revalidate. Как называется эта дичь? Сервер action. Забыл, как называется эта дичь. Server actions. Почему в доке это не находим? Вот, server actions. А потому что мы на странице искали. Revalidate. Что-то сходу не находится. Ну, вот, наверное, в роутинге. Так, роутинг. Parallel routes, наверное. Вот это loads. И вот server actions with road, parallel routes. И давай вот на странице найдем. Validate tag. А нету. Ладно.
Uses the dashboard events tag. So we're going to revalidate this tag. So I'm going to go back to our events function. I'm going to go down here. I'm going to import something called revalidate tag.
Может, это в тегах описано? Вот по семантике. Тег. Тоже не вижу описания тега. О, вот здесь вот может. Unstable cache. Вот server actions. Revalidate path. Нет описания такого явного.
From next cache. And then I'm going to say revalidate that. Dashboard events. Okay. This might work. Or it won't. Let me just do a hard refresh just in case. And now I'm going to create one. And it shows up. Because we revalidated the cache, which triggered this to run the query again, therefore getting the latest data.
So I have a question. When
Yes.
using like TRPC, would you just use, like, how would you combine the two of those together?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's tough because it's like I'm doing that in production, and the question you just asked me is something I ask myself every single day. Like, how do I do this? Why am I doing this? I'll just tell you how I'm doing it,
Okay.
and you can decide if it's valuable for you. So what we do is let's pick a page. I'll pick this page here. Okay. So here I have the data, right? I did the initial. This is literally what I do in my app. I do an initial request. I'll check. I'll get the user. I'll get the initial data for this. I'll immediately do something like this. I'll have something here that's like, home. This is like the actual home right here. And this is gonna be like from like components, slash the actual.
TRPC — это такая штука, которую я встречал только вот здесь. 3T-GG у Т усача. Это вот здесь вот в стеке вот этой вот абстракции на Next.js, на этом бойлерплейте. Вот я TRPC вот здесь встречал. И TRPC — это вот такая штука. Ну, типа поменяли что-то на серверке, и автоматически типы контракты, короче, засинхались. Вот. И вопрос про то, как он юзает, как он дружит эту штуку.
Home component. That's not what I call it, but you get the point. And then there's nothing here. There's absolutely nothing here. And what I do instead is I'll say actual home, and I'll pass in that data. So whatever data I got here, I'm passing it directly in here. So in this case, it'll be that. This component is a client component. It's a client component that takes this prop, and in the case of TRPC, which uses React Query, in that hook where you do the use query, or in TRPC's case, it's like TRPC dot the name of your query dot use query or something like that. You can pass the options object that says like initial data, which is like, what is the initial data for this query before it even makes the query? I pass this into it. So what I'm doing is I'm making sure whatever my server component queries returns the exact same thing that this TRPC, the TRPC query in here would return. So I can just populate the TRPC's cache with whatever the initial render of this is. And then from there, it's all TRPC. Okay. Whether it's mutations, whether it's queries, it's all just TRPC. I don't use what I just showed you guys.
Got it.
For a few reasons. I didn't know how to do it when I first made the app. That's the biggest one. Two, it's just a lot more work, in my opinion, right now when it comes to like things that are very hyperactive, like are like hyper interactive. So polling, infinite scrolling, web sockets, things like that. That's just a lot harder to do in this world of, you know, caching, mutating, invalidating the cache. Caching, mutating, invalidating the cache. That process is just a lot more to think about the more interactive your app becomes. But when it's like a form or a simple create like we just did, pretty simple. So because of that, we want to keep like, we don't want like everyone on the team to be an expert on when to make that decision. We just decided like, just use TRPC for everything because that works. It's fine. It's not that big of a deal. And also we're like an app, we're a dashboard. It doesn't really matter. But if we were more of like a static site with some interaction, I would probably lean towards more doing all the server side stuff because we're like if I'm New York Times, I'm not doing TRPC. I'm doing this because this is all server side. TRPC is like very client side, it's very heavy. That's gonna be slow on people's phones compared to doing something server side, whereas like none of that JavaScript gets loaded up because it's all on the server. So it really just depends on the experience, I think.
What's the relationship between use transition and suspense, or is there one?
I don't think they have any relation. I don't think there's any relation between what a transition does and what suspense does, because you don't have to use a promise inside of a transition. You can do whatever you want. A transition is just saying, this is something that normally affects the UI, which typically is like a state change or something like that, and I don't want it to. That doesn't have to be asynchronous. A suspense is like, here's a promise. I want to wait for this promise to resolve. In the meantime, show this thing. That's a suspense. And that is more of like something to do with like network layer. It's more aware of what's actually happening. It's more purposefully built. Start transition is a generic function that just opts you out of locking down the UI. Like the best way I can describe it is like, it's like request animation frame for state. It's like, that's the best way I can describe it. Request animation frame, if you don't know what that is, it's like you would use that to make your animation smooth, you know, do that like 16 milliseconds to get 60 frames per second. But it's like that, but for like state. So that's the best way I can describe it. But right now, Next.js is using and it's not their fault. React just came out with this. And it has use transition, but now you can do async things.
Да, заметили, что вот в этом арке нету адресной строки. Вот хуй его знает. Да, что он сайт показывает, а что это за сайт? Где она?
So now you can't await that. So we can't do that right now. So earlier when I was like, oh yeah, you know, you probably want to be able to, where was it? Here. I was like, oh, you probably want to be able to return this. and get the result of it to do something. Well, we can't in our current implementation because I can't await this in a transition. Oh, where is that at? The nav. I cannot, as far as I know, this is not async yet, unless they updated it.
Here is a link to React 19 docs. Does not take any parameters. Return start transition function. Return use transition lets you mark a state update as transition. Он сколько кавицев, да? Marking a state update as a non-blocking transition. А где? Почему не запускается-то? Пример-то почему не запускается? Ну ладно.
I don't think it is. And if it is, I haven't used it yet, so I don't feel comfortable teaching it. But I do feel comfortable talking about it. And this is what's coming. You can async this start transition, you can await a promise, and you can get whatever you want back. And you can do all the things here. So I think that closes the loop for a lot of things as well. These are the things that I'm talking about that makes it a lot easier to use this technique now. This cache, server-side query, bust the cache. Like now this is a lot easier. Like cool, because I'm inside of a client component. This is a client component. I'm using a server mutation, a server action, and I'm getting the result right back here for my client. I can bound it to a state, so now my JSX can see it. Yeah, this kind of closes the loop, right? So this does a lot of things for you as far as like being able to use this without having to go through all these hoops. So it's getting better, but like I said, Next.js was waiting on React to do a lot of these things. I really like the approach that they're taking. They're like, we just want to make what React is doing easier, but we're not gonna like go introduce all this crazy stuff to you guys. Like we're just gonna build opinions on the foundations that they built, and I think that's the great way to do it. But sometimes that just means Next.js ends up releasing things super early, and people are just like, what's going on? But reality is just like they can't do anything. They have to wait until React fixes stuff. We talked about revalidating the cache on the initial server queries or the server actions that we did on the React server components for our pages and slots. I now just want to kind of cover all the different ways you can revalidate and some of the other ways in which your data might automatically be revalidated. So just want to kind of cover some of that. So one of the first ones is time-based revalidation. Time-based revalidation occurs automatically after a specific time interval. So there's a way you can do that. I don't really use fetch a lot on the server side, but if you look at the Next.js docs, they use it a lot. You can tell they've obviously patched fetch to be able to do things like this, but you can give it a time if you're using the fetch in which you want this to revalidate. Otherwise, it'll always, when you call it again within that time, it'll just be cached. So that's something you can do. I've just never had good experience with time-based caching for a front-end app. I feel like that's better for like, you know, something network layer, you know, something that you can actually use a TTL on and do something on a network level, maybe like Redis, but I don't know. I just never had good, I just never figure out, well, what time do I put here? How often should this be? Because it's like the unpredictable nature of a user. Who knows how long they're going to be somewhere? So I guess it's like a combination of give it a revalidate time, but then also at the same time you revalidate it yourself. So maybe it's a combination, but by itself, I feel like it's not too useful. Like, what number do you know what to put here? You can also do this. So that's like if you're using fetch on the server side. But if you're just like, in our case, the pages, well, not our case because we're using cookies, but in places where the cookies were not being used, you could say, oh, cool, you can export a variable called revalidate in a page or a layout. And you can give it a time in seconds. And that's how long that page will be revalidated if you wanted to do that. But again, this doesn't really matter to us because all of our pages and slots use cookies. So it's never cached until we cached it with the memoize function. So that's how you do that. Again, I will probably never do that. I don't know when I would do that or why, or I mean, what would that look like? Like if someone's on your app, they're just sitting on a screen and then it revalidated and like 30 things just popped up, like a jump scare. I don't know, like that'd be kind of weird. It's like I want more control of when that happens, but maybe I'm thinking about it wrong. Couple other things here. So on-demand revalidation, this is what we did. So you could do a revalidate path, which is something we didn't have to do, again, because really none of our pages were cached because they had cookies. If they didn't use something on the header, a revalidate path is pretty much, you can think of it as like every page gets its own tag. Its tag is its URL. So you can say revalidate this path. So this whole page, revalidate it, and you know it'll get cleaned out. We use tag based, which is like exactly what it sounds like. We give it a tag, we can revalidate it when we call revalidate with that tag. So you can also do that with fetch. Again, I rarely use fetch inside of server components. Maybe I just haven't hit that use case yet. One of the things I have done though is like use third-party APIs that have like SDKs, like for instance Stripe or something like that on the server side, and obviously those things are making HTTP calls, but you don't have access to or even know if they're using fetch. So the caching strategy to that is, I don't know. I don't really know how that works, but at the same time, do I want that to be cached? So there's still a lot to think about on the server side, in my opinion, and I don't know. I don't think a lot of people actually do fetch on the server side like this. If they do, I'm writing code wrong. I don't really do a lot of server side fetch calls, I guess. If there's an API that I need to hit on the server side, it's probably through some SDK that I installed, most likely. It's like very rare where I'll do that if the SDK is busted or something like that. But I guess if you had like microservices and you were talking across your microservices, I can see that. So maybe it's useful there. I don't have microservices. Yep, revalidate tag, that's what we did here, so we know about that one. Oh, this one's really nice. So basically, if the revalidation fails, when you call revalidation tag or the time expires or revalidation path and the revalidation fails, it'll just serve the last one that was good. So it won't be in a broken state. That's actually quite useful. So opting out of some of the data caching. So here's some of the things you can do on the fetch. You can say no store like this, or you can set revalidate to 0. That works as well. Route handler requests. We don't have any route handlers in this course. There really isn't much more advanced stuff to them other than what I covered in the intro, so I didn't really need to cover it. But if you use headers or cookies, that route handler won't be cached because those things are dynamic. Anything attached to the request object, it won't be cached. If you're not using those things and you just want to force that route handler to be not cached, you can say dynamic equals force and you can export that.
I guess, like, do you recommend using no cache at all, or would you recommend to try to always cache?
The way that I think about it is I'm shooting to always get cache, but I want to be in control of the cache. I don't like the automatic caching, and I don't like if you use this function anywhere, like, because the problem is it's not obvious, right? Like sometimes you'll be in a React server component that uses a function, that uses a function, that uses a function, that uses a function, and that function uses a cookie. So then it's like, how do you know if this is caching or not? That's where it starts to get complicated. So for me, I would just rather, you know, turn off the caching, the automatic caching, and then opt into caching manually by doing the thing that I showed you guys how to do, and then just do on-demand revalidation by calling revalidate tag. That way, at least I know what I cached and when I revalidate it, versus it depends on the time or the dev environment or production or what method you use. Like, to me, that's just so complicated to keep track of. So you definitely want cache, but you want it to be predictable.
Вот это ценный был вопрос. А где он отключал кэширование вручную? Оно здесь отключено в Next.config. Кэш-хендлер.
So the last thing we'll do, which is kind of just like now apply everything you learn and go build this, is we have like 2 more pages in our app that kind of need some love. Like, we really haven't done anything on them, you know, and we really should. We should go fill these pages with all the data and the JSX they need. So let's go in and do those, and that way we can kind of just apply all the things we just did on 2 different pages. So the first page is going to be the events page. I already made it. Just on mine it just says.
Да, давай откроем. Finish the app. Utils events.js. Get all events. Get one event. Ну, давай вместе с ним посмотрим.
Null. And actually, there's going to be 3 pages. There's going to be the events page where it lists all the events. There's going to be a event page where you can get one event by one ID. So we need to make some server functions for those 2. And then there's going to be an attendees page that lists all the attendees. So that one needs a function too. So let's go do that. So first we'll go to the utils events. And we're going to make some more functions in here. So the other function we're going to make is going to be get all events. This one's super easy. So get all events. I'm just going to go ahead and add my memorize now because I already know I'm doing it. And
Да, мимо-айста у нас не установлено. Смотри, установлено. Next.js better understand cache. Unstable.
get all events takes in a user ID, which is a string. And all it's going to do after delay, of course, is get the events. Equals awaits db dot query dot, okay, I did that. db dot query dot events dot find many where equals events dot created by ID is user ID, like that. So that'll give us our events, and then just order by what did I have here? Oh, ascending event start on. Okay, so we'll say ascending events dot start on. So that'll be our query. It's just going to go get all the events where the created by ID of that event equals the given user ID, and then order by an ascending order events dot start on. So it'll show the oldest one on top. Okay, and then just need to return that. I'm just going to just get rid of the await and just return it, I guess. And then we need to set up our cache stuff here. So I'm going to say type persist true. That's the main one, and then revalidate tags. This will be events. And because we already have a mutation where we create events with that plus button, and we revalidated that slot for the events, I also need to revalidate this page for the events. So I'm going to go back to our events action file where we do a revalidate tag. I'm going to revalidate another tag for events.
Так.
So that page also gets revalidated when a new event gets created. Okay, we got get all events. Now we might as well go ahead and get the one for the get one event as well. This one's gonna be slightly different on the cache, on the key for the revalidation, because it has a event ID. So we need to create a key based on that. Get one event. Finalize async. And this one takes in a user ID and an event ID. Like that. And then this one's pretty simple. You just do a find first where those two things match. So I'll await a delay, and I'll just return db.query.events.find first, where and equals events dot ID is equal to event ID, and then the other one is equal to events dot created by ID is user ID. There we go. So I got that. And then for other stuff, the cache situation, we'll say persist true. And then for the revalidation tags, this has a user ID here. I don't really need that one, but here's the event ID. Here I do need that. So I can say this is events, event ID. So we're gonna go to
Я не понял, как оно ревалидируется. Ну, типа... В чем point? Еще разочек.
But here true. And then for the revalidation tags, this has a user ID here. I don't really need that one, but here's the event ID. Here I do need that. So I can say this is events, event ID. So
Блин, он просто говорит, что он печатает, он не говорит, почему он это печатает. Набирает.
we're gonna go to dashboard events, page.tsx. I think I already have it in mind. It just does no. Not to be confused with at events, just events, two different things. And I'm just gonna put this in here. So.
И что, работает? Работает. Только зачем мы revalidate делали? Потому что вот мы добавляем это events. И типа мы же все равно делаем запрос. Вот добавили, и все равно запрос идет.
This is going to get the current user, as always. It's going to get all the events, the thing we just made. And it's just going to put it here with the name. And then when you click on one, it'll take you to the event detail for that. So let's make a route for that. So in events, we'll make a new folder. Call it bracket ID. This is for parameters. And inside of there, we'll make a page.tsx. Like that.
Dynamic route. Page.tsx. Копируем вот эту тему. Params. Да, смотри, все работает. Заработало.
And then for this, I'll just grab this JSX. There we go. If you want to get the incoming parameter for a dynamic route, it's always passed in on the params object of the page. It's always that. So it'll be params.id because I called it ID here. If I call this anything else, this will be params.anything else. So let's check that out. See if that works. Let's go to our events. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, so that seems to be working. Let's go to this event. See what happens. Oh, there it is. The reason it took so long that time is because we're in dev mode, and that page didn't get compiled until I clicked on it. So you can see right here, it took 307 milliseconds to compile that page because we're in dev mode, and the pages don't get compiled until you hit them at least once. In production, that gets compiled before you deploy, so that delay would have happened.
Так, вот это мы запишем. Значит, in dev mode, pages don't get compiled until you hit them at least once.
You hit them at least once. In production,
that gets compiled before you deploy. Да, мудрость тысячи змей.
that gets compiled before you deploy, so that delay would have happened. There still is going to be a delay, it just won't be that long. Like if I go back here, there's still for sure going to be a delay here. That was a delay in the data fetching, but the actual component is already compiled. So this is where the reason that looks like that is because we don't have a loading, right? It's just sitting there. We're not streaming this down. So I clicked it, but see how long it took? Because we didn't enable suspense, we didn't do streaming, so it's waiting to transition to go. So you need to add a loading TSX to prevent that from happening, so it can transition, show the loader, and then it'll come in. It'll stream in when it comes. So if you don't want that, add a loading TSX.
So why did the events page, when you redirect it, why does that one have a loading? Is it picking up the dashboard parents loading?
This events page?
Yeah,
Oh, wait,
if you hard refresh,
refresh.
And reload that, it has a loader.
Oh, it does, yeah.
We don't have a loading.
Do I have a loading here?
No, because I don't have one, and it's still doing it. So is it picking that up from the parent somehow? The parent layout? Or
No, I don't think. I mean, we can test it out. Let's see. I don't think so.
or yeah, because it shouldn't be picking up.
But there is a dashboard events loading page.
Yeah, is it picking it from the add events one?
That'd be fine. Maybe it does go up to its. If it doesn't, no, I don't know.
Okay, yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is. It is picking that one up. I didn't know it picked up its ancestors. Then in that, I don't know. I think that's a bug.
Because then you'd assume that the ID one would also pick up the ancestors, but
Oh.
Right, because like it only goes one level up. Does it go 2 levels up? That's kind of inconsistent. Yeah, that could very well be a bug. I've actually never seen that before.
no, the ID one had one too.
Yeah.
It does?
When I hard refresh.
Oh, then I know there's a way to do a global loading. You specifically have to say this is the global loading indicator, and that one will work for everything.
Yeah, but if you hit the events page, you know, because I've got like the spinner for the events page, but then I've got but if you click on the one, it does the ... loading. So it is using the one that's down in the bracketed.
Actually, I know what's happening here.
Yeah.
This isn't the I think. Let me see. Hold on. I think what's happening here is
Expand events.
this what we're seeing is we're not seeing the loading for this. Okay, we're actually seeing the loading for the page because check out the layout, right? The layout will load the children, okay, when it's not in dashboard mode. So I think what we're seeing is because we go to /dashboard/events, we're going to see the loading here no matter what. Whereas in these examples, these things have their own loaders. But if you look at the layout here, like these things are rendered like in their own slots. But here it's just like one child. So I think it's just picking it up that way specifically because. Wait, no, I still would imagine to do that.
ID,
No.
Expand your ID there once.
Yeah. Actually, let's do this.
Well, you don't have a loader there.
No, I don't have one. Let's make something. Let's do one. Let's see what happens here. I'm curious now. So to here. Okay, let's try that. Am I in the right? Okay, I'm in the right thing. Let's see what happens.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. I guess it just picks up its parents. It's grandparents, it's ancestors, it's
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
So
then
ju-
you could put a loading down in the ID bracketed area.
oh yeah, put one there? Okay.
Yeah, if you, well, and actually in your main branch,
Mhm.
you got one there.
Oh, I do.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
and so.
That would make sense. Yeah. Huh.
And if so, when you click on the individual one, it uses that. So now if you can say event, right, there you go. And then you click on one.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That is interesting. Let's see. Let's do this together. I wanna see something right quick. Let's go to the docs.
I feel like that, you
Let's
know,
see.
with the way suspense works, I think that's like kind of like the behavior of like a suspense boundary if you were to do that manually. So
Yeah, because it's that's what I was trying to figure out. I'm like, it's probably just wrapping. It's
Какой-то этот китаец, да, инсектоидный, сейчас говорил, задавал вопрос какому-то моссу.
wrapping the whole
yeah,
tree.
literally.
Right.
Yeah.
Just like a boundary, yeah. But the way the routing works, it shouldn't.
Right, I see what you're saying, though. It's like a different page.
Это one, вот этот.
Oh, you know what? I think what I was trying to say, and I think it just came to because I lost my train of thought. I think the loading wraps the. Does it wrap? No, I was gonna say it wraps the layout, which would mean everything would have the same loader, but I don't think it wraps the layout. I thought it wraps the actual page. So
Which is interesting because that page renders the count, doesn't it? Technically,
Yeah.
The dashboard page renders the count, but it's not in this because it's a different page.
Right.
But it's still using that loader. So I thought they were like tightly associated, where that loading was for that page, but it seems like it can also be used for children.
right, that is interesting. Huh. I don't see any mention of global or anything here. Now I'm just like super fascinated about that. Parents, maybe. Oh, I don't know. Something new. Pretty cool. That's actually a really cool feature.
Да.
There is another page to be done, but I'm gonna leave that page for you guys to do for extra credit to get some more reps in. So the other page is going to be, I mean, the code is here in the notes, but it's basically the attendees page, I believe. So yeah, need to make a get guest list function that does this super complicated SQL query that I don't even think works the way it should, but do that and make a page for it and then add that query. It's pretty simple, but I figured you can always get more reps. Yeah, as far as I wanted to cover it here, this was it. I think if you know how to take advantage of these things, and these are things that I use all the time in production, I think you're gonna have a pleasant experience. You're gonna be getting the best out of the framework. There are other things in here that I did not touch. I talked about intercepting routes and combining them with route or parallel routes to like make modals and things like that. But I'll be honest, I've just never did that. I've built it before just to see how it works, but I've always had problems with it. There was always gotchas, and I didn't really seem to care about having a modal be bound to a URL, which makes sense. It's great. You can go back and forth and close it and open it. It's great. But I don't know. I never really did it. I also use like state machines for my UI, which kind of solves a lot of that anyway. So didn't really think about that. there was a lot that goes on with like the fetch function in Next.js and caching. I didn't talk about that as much because, like I said, I don't really use the fetch function that much directly on the server side. On the client side, maybe a little bit, but I don't really use it as much anymore. So I didn't really feel the need to talk about it. And if I don't use it in production, if I'm not building with it, I'm not really going to teach about it. So that, the other things that might be interesting in Next.js that I didn't really talk about that you might want to go look at. This piece right here talks about different
Еще раз. Так. Patterns. Data fetching patterns and best practices.
patterns and best practices around getting data. Like, how do you actually get data and what are different patterns? So they talk about loading things in parallel. They talk about streaming. They talk about sequential data fetching. Like, here's an example where they preload the data. So you export a function that calls the thing that you need. You just don't await it. You just call it, and then you can preload it before someone actually goes to that route, and then you can just check to see if it's available. So to like really speed things up, there's some really cool stuff there. There's like some scenarios where they talk about, yeah, here we go. You can run these two things in parallel. These are both functions that return promises, but you don't have to wait on them here, right? So you just kind of resolve them together. So there's a couple cool concepts in here that you might want to check out that are quite helpful. I don't use any of this stuff in production, so I didn't talk about it. But I did think it was helpful. It did help me figure out what I wanted to do in my app, but I don't actually use these patterns in production.
You have another like best practices question with regards to like performance, like as like your application grows, or like any kind of like gotchas or things you should look out for to like make sure like your bundle doesn't get
Китаец что-то, да, так разговорился.
really big or things like that.
Yeah, for the most part, Next.js does a really good job of optimizing your bundles, right? It basically starts with splitting on the routes. It starts from there. So you could think of every single page you have in here is its own app. It's its own route, right? Because that's kind of where it starts. So it won't load up any of its parents or anything like that. So every page is its own app. From there, what you might find out is that, because at the end of the day, you're just trying to protect the client. So you got to start thinking like, okay, I'm importing these client components everywhere. Do these client components have to be inside? Like, do these client components have to be loaded before the file is downloaded? And if it's probably not the case, what you could do is you can use the next dynamic right here, which basically uses suspense and lazy loading from React.lazy together to basically stream in that client component inside of like, another component. So you could do things like that to speed things up. It'd be very situational when you would use that. Like, I haven't had the issue where I'm like, if I didn't have this would have been really bad. So, I mean, it's cool. For the most part, people use this function to bypass server-side rendering. Like, if you have a client component that you don't want to be server-side rendered, because remember, everything gets server-side rendered, even if it's a client component. But if you don't want that client component being rendered, server-side rendered, because maybe it's using some library that you installed that internally uses window and you can't change it, so that's breaking on the server, so you would dynamically import that, and through here you can tell it SSR false, so don't render this on the server, and it'll bypass that. So that's the thing. I would say, other than that, I would try to what I found out is it's best practices to like take out code that you reuse and put it into its own. That's why I make multiple files like this and like utils, because it helps Next.js. It helps the compiler like understand what code needs to go where and help it dedupe it. Versus if it's all like stuck in one file or one place, it's harder to split. It can't split within the file, but it can split on a file basis. So if I have all these other files, it can just like, all right, you know what, this isn't being used in this module tree, so just don't even add it. Whereas if I have all this code in the file, let's say I have 20 functions being exported, and one of those functions I use somewhere else, it's got to get that whole file now, even though I'm only using one function in there. So it's like doing things like that helps out a lot. Yeah, for the most part, I would say that's it. And then I would say try to get like as close to static as possible. So like if your app doesn't need to be dynamic as far as like the data that it gets, then don't make it dynamic for no reason. So try to get to static, push everything down to the client. So like your client components are super small for no reason.
Так, тихо. Мудро тысячи змей фиксируем.
And so try to get to static.
Try to get the static. Push everything down to the client.
Push everything down to the client. So like your client components are super small. They handle one interaction. That's it. And you'll probably go really far. So what I recommend as far as like what you should do next, go pick some app that you like, you use. It could be a web app, it could be a mobile app, something that probably seems impossible or at least extremely complicated to build, and then try to build it in Next.js. That's going to force you to to use things you've never used before. If you pick something that's easy, you probably won't finish it, or two, you won't reach for tools you've never had to use before. So I would say try to do something that's a little outside of your skill set or your comfortability, and use Next.js to build it. Just struggle, even if it's like something you do, like I'm just gonna work on this on my lunch break, just do some stuff, and it takes you 3 months to do. Like you're gonna learn a lot through that struggle. Like that's really how I learned this stuff. I'll just pick something that I have no business trying to build, and I'm like, cool, that's how I'm gonna learn Python. Like it'd be like the craziest thing, and I'm like, okay, I learned it. That was terrible, but now I know it. Whereas I realize if I just
Да, learning is terrible. Я полностью согласен со Скоттом Моссом. Struggling with learning is terrible.
It's like, I'm just gonna go build a to-do app right quick. I don't really learn anything, or I never finish it because I'm not interested in it. I have to like be interested. So highly recommend doing that. And then once you do that once or twice, like you'll be comfortable. You can teach anybody this stuff when it comes to folks at your company that might need to use it. So yeah, other than that, that's it. That's what I wanted to cover. I hope you guys got a lot from the course. I tried my best to fit everything that I think was valuable and useful from my own perspective, but also how other people might see it. But then also take into account what Next.js is putting out there in the community, and trying to like align what they're saying. I don't want to be saying they're not saying the right thing or I'm not saying the right thing. I'm just trying to make sure everybody's benefiting from all this content. So that was really the most difficult part, but I'm glad we got it out, and I hope you guys got some value from it, and thanks for coming.
Да, благодарочка, Скотт Мосс. Thank you. Ну и так, наша традиция. Постим на X. Постим на LinkedIn. Наши успехи. Ну что, ребятки, благодарочка. Дальше мы будем React.js на Monster Lessons. Так, Monster Lessons. Где Angular? Нет. Где эта ссылка? Вот, Specials. Monster Lessons Academy. Вот, вот здесь разве нету? Категории. Серии. Только вот это, ну, старенький, да? Вот здесь. Вот. Как я уже говорил, главное в курсах на Monster Lessons это вот, чтобы после прохождения курсов у вас не было такого же ебала. Да, шучу. Шутка. Ну, Monster Lessons. Ладно. Наверное, не очень хорошо так шутить. Так, my profile, my courses. Вот этот, да, $12. Enroll the course. Buy now. Надо будет попробовать вбить эту русскую карточку. Может, оно и прокатит. Ну все, ребятки. Всем пока.